a fire blowing round.
Great. Well, thanks so much for doing this. We are so looking forward to the concert you are preparing from, or you've recorded now from your home, and going to be part of our Elora Festival. Of course, you are going to be part of the Elora Festival and performing in our barn. And then March rolls around, and who could have thought that the world would have stopped in this way? It's just unbelievable. What have the last 4 months been like for you?
Goodness, it's really been a ride. My husband, who plays drums with me for the concert that we recorded, he and I have a 10-year-old son. And so, but we're both freelance musicians. And so just to paint a picture for you, when Canada went into lockdown, I had just been on tour since mid-February. I had been in Florida, Gainesville, Georgia. And then, if you can believe it, I went to New York City, which, just exploded in terms of the number of cases in early March.
Oh, wow.
And we filmed a video there, like right in the streets of New York. And I was doing
on your website now?
It is.
Yeah,
it is.
okay.
Yeah. Revival. And so there we were. And then Ben and I, as often happens, we tag teamed. I got home on, I think it was the 7th, the day that he flew west. And actually, I had gone to Nanaimo after being in New York. I went to Nanaimo for a festival there. And then he went to the West Coast to start a tour with Natalie McMaster.
Right.
And so I was back home, he was on the road, and the following week was to go to Saskatoon to host the Juno Jazz Showcase at the Juno Awards. And my flight was scheduled for the 13th. And I was going to bring our son Josh with us. So I dropped him off at school. I was going to pick him up, and go straight to the airport.
Right.
And I got a call from one of the senior people at CBC Music, Carla. And she said, "Don't get on that plane." And, she was clearly dealing with a lot. So there wasn't much time to ask her questions, but I figured, of course, this has to do with COVID. And then within 24 hours, news broke that the Junos had been canceled. And in the same kind of cycle of time, Ben was texting me saying, the health minister of British Columbia literally came to the venue in Duncan and said, "You guys can't perform tonight." So they had sound checked, they were ready to perform, and they had another couple weeks of touring lined up. And Ben was on the next flight out at 6 a.m. and home that evening in Toronto. And then, of course, that was really when the world went into lockdown. And at that point, we transitioned to homeschooling. I had a new album, Mark, that came out March 27th, and a bunch of global tour dates, tour dates across Europe lined up that we've been working on for months, and a radio campaign that was already kind of underway, but then everybody had to, all these media outlets were shuttering their doors. They had to, including CBC, where I'm a host. I had an interview lined up with Tom Power at Q, which I was so excited about. And, so all of that stuff, got canned. It had to. And we all hunkered down, found a completely new way to release the album. We did a release party online, just my husband and I with our son, Josh, in the mix.
Oh, so that's fun.
Yeah, so that was my very long-winded answer. And basically for the first, March, April, May, June, first 4 months, it was about trying to balance homeschooling with our professional lives, because, it's not like everything just came to a standstill. We had to reinvent the wheel, what it would look like to release the album and stay vital as musicians. And now we're in summer and things haven't changed that much. Right. But we have a slightly better handle on technology. I'm lucky. I married not only a great drummer, but an engineer. So he's been a huge help in transitioning us to the online space.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good.
Yeah.
Do you have a I mean, you told us a little bit about what was going on for you in March, but was there a last concert that you gave? I mean,
Yeah.
for me, you know, it was, I think, the 8th or 9th of March. I gave the last concert that I had. We gave that concert certainly not knowing. I mean, we knew something was kind of brewing, but there was no sense in our
Yeah.
minds that this is the last concert for a while. And now we look back, and as much as that seems like it's, you know, years ago now, it's only 4 months. You know, that concert kind of takes on a new meaning and a new memory for us because it's the last one, and it's going to be the last one for a while. So, what was that last concert for you?
Absolutely. And you know, it's funny, Mark, I was hesitant to take that gig, which ended up being the last concert. It was the one out in Nanaimo. It was for the Harbor Jazz Fest.
Okay.
And that's a unique jazz festival. And it's one, you know, I'd never done. They had asked me to come be a special guest on a number of occasions. And, you know, it's multifaceted. So it's a festival that focuses on students, high school students, big bands more specifically. And so it's a celebration of multiple big bands on Vancouver Island, and they all congregate. And so for me, it involved several parts. I got to perform for 700 students at the Port Theatre in Nanaimo. And that, of course, has its unique, you know, had its unique set of responsibilities
Yeah.
and joys,
Yeah.
because I don't do that very often, but it was fantastic. And then I also got to perform with the big band, you know, this all-star big band, which consisted of students assembled from the various big bands across the island. And so I played some music that they had asked me to learn. Again, not something I normally do. And then a couple of my own arrangements. And my gosh, I'm just so grateful I got to experience the energy of those students and the joy of performing, you know, not only for the kids earlier in the day, but then that night for their parents and their families. It was just such a celebration of all the reasons we do music. And it reminded me, you know, of those days, those
Yeah.
early formative years when I was a high school band student with Bob Rebliati at Handsworth Secondary School,
Big shout
doing
out.
the big band, right? The big band festival circuit.
Yeah.
And so it was really nostalgic for me. And now looking back, you know, more than ever, like you said, that's the concert that is kind of burned into my memory, because we love being able to share music on the online space. It's so valuable, but there's nothing like a live show, right? And the energy of
Well,
people in real time responding to what's happening on stage. They become a part of that show. I think audiences sometimes don't realize how critical they are to the performance that's taking place, right?
for
It's this
sure.
beautiful exchange of energy, and they create that atmosphere that the musicians sort of tap into, to create something really unique. So
Yeah, you're
yeah, that
absolutely
was the last one for me, and that was on the 6th of March.
right. Okay. Okay. Um, have you thought much about what music's going to look like when we get out of this? In other words, you
Well,
know,
you know, I'll tell.
are things going to change? Like, how are they going to change for you? I mean, we're thinking in terms of, you know, choir music and choir performances,
Yeah.
adapting, and how do we adapt to meet the new challenges of this? You know, what are you thinking about?
Well, you know, it's really interesting. Just to respond to your challenges as a choir, so many of the articles and studies that are taking place about, you know, I guess they refer to it as aerosol,
Right.
and you know, those microscopic droplets that are expelled when we speak or sing.
Yes.
And so while the music industry is trying to respond safely and responsibly to this pandemic, you know, I think singers are especially under fire,
Yeah.
with, you know, because we, you know, expel when we sing. And so there, I think, are greater concerns. And so I've been reading articles about choirs, you know, and how they need to socially distance, not only from the audience, but from one another. And so I'm thinking about what that would look like for you guys. And for me, at the moment, actually, we are looking to embark on a small tour of BC, where
Okay.
the economy has started to open up. And I have friends who are already performing again, and actually not only outdoors, but indoors. And Bonnie Henry, who has been way on top of things since
Yes,
day
she has.
one,
Yep.
man, she's okay with this. And so we actually are partnering with a few presenters out west, and we're going to do a series of, it's interesting, they're taking a different shape in each city. We're going to 4 cities, and in a couple of instances we're outside with very limited attendance, big distance between the stage and the audience. The audience members will be physically distanced, and they will wear masks, even though I know there's some debate as to whether or not that's really necessary outside. So we're going to be doing that. And then there's one where we will be in a venue with a very small number of staff, no audience members. And that will be, a live to tape concert, but in a dedicated space that is associated with the Langley Jazz Festival. Okay. So the viewers get to see something familiar. So I feel like we're seeing a little bit of that in Ontario already, where folks have gone into the bistro, the jazz bistro with a band where the band is masked. If there's a singer, they're the only one who isn't wearing a mask. Maybe there's a sound person and someone operating a video camera, and they'll either live stream or do a live to tape. So I think we'll see some of that. I am curious to see, I don't know when we're going to have live audiences again, even in limited capacities. I am encouraged by what we're seeing in BC. I have a huge tour booked for out east for early next year, and I just don't know what's going to happen there. And I think my agent is, it's bated breath, right?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Because we all want to get back there, and I think audiences want to get back there, but again, safety is paramount, because we don't want to take 2 steps forward and then 5 steps back.
Right, and that's the real danger, right? Is
exactly.
One incident can really affect people very widely, and
that's right.
That's been the nature of the choir debate too. Choirs have never been in the news so much, and and unfortunately, it's not for
it's a blessing and a curse, right?
Well, yeah, it's not for good reason, and so now we're trying to sort of dispel the sensational sort of reporting on a few bad experiences where people did get sick in choir settings,
right.
and sort of separate that from what does the science behind these aerosols actually say, and we just don't know enough about it yet, and so that's we're kind of waiting for that the studies, the science to come out to say, what are the actual dangers, and then how can we get back to doing this safely. So we're kind of thinking, what are the opportunities here for us to kind of change how we do things a little bit. Choir singing, hasn't changed much in 500 years. You basically, in front of an audience, you sing and they clap, and everybody's happy. But I think there's some neat opportunities that we can explore, some different kinds of ways of reaching audiences that might stay with us even once audiences come back. But yes. Yeah, you're right about having that audience there. Even as a conductor, I spend most of my time with my back to the audience, but I know they're there, and I know when they're into it, and I know when they're not. You can just feel it, right? And that's so important. And I imagine for you too, it's such an interplay almost in the music making that you do.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating difference between live to tape and live stream. So to clarify for viewers and listeners, live to tape is where you have a little more control over the sonic environment, and you play a show as if you were playing it live. You're not, doing songs twice. It has to be kind of a
seamless.
There has to be a through line. But with live stream, as so many people have experienced, you could have an Ethernet cable, everything set up to the very best of your ability. You could do an extensive tech rehearsal, and things can still go wrong just because, bandwidths and technology, like they're just kind of idiosyncratic.
Yeah.
But the one benefit that I do find to live stream performances, warts and all, is that you do get a little bit of that real live feedback. So you can't hear people applauding, but if you're able to see a little bit of the feed, you might see clap emojis.
Right.
there's a little bit of a community experience that happens and gathers around that live stream performance. And actually live to tape, you see some of that as well, where, you know, a concert is broadcast for the first time, it's debuted for the first time online. And so in that sense, there's excitement. People are seeing and experiencing that performance for the first time live, on a live space online, and a real-time space. And then you'll get some of that community response as well. And what I like about that is, because I'm not performing, I can watch and I can participate in the comments,
Right, you could
you
sort of
know,
sit there
which
and
is really
stealthily,
fun. So
right, comment
yeah,
along. Yeah.
exactly.
That is kind of a, you know, the new mode of this year is sort of
Yeah.
that experience, isn't it? Right.
Yeah, and audiences seem to really appreciate it. And, you know, Mark, I want to thank you and the Elora Festival for giving us the opportunity, because musicians need opportunities right now, right? We have so few now compared to what we once did. And I know you probably feel the same way, right, as a choral director. Though I have to say, I am so sad I won't get to sing with your group, right? That was part of the
That was part of our
plan.
plan. Well,
So
you know, we're just
hopefully
gonna
we
have
can
to
do it another time.
we'll park that idea. We'll come back to it. And,
Exactly.
when all of this is over, we'll have that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You
Yeah.
know, we just released a CD as well this spring, and of course we had plans to do sort of a live launch and you know,
Oh,
have a concert involved, and that got changed. So we did an online launch to our CD as well, and like you did. So
cool.
I think there's some similarities maybe that we share there. But can you tell us a little bit about the new recording?
Yes. Yes. It's called Out of Dust.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons that I decided to move forward with releasing it was it actually felt like it really belonged in this strange time in history. The songs were written during a very difficult period in my life. Just a strange kind of, I'm not quite sure what the right word is. It's not really paradox, but I had just won the Juno in 2019. I was riding a career high,
Yeah.
but there were a lot of things that had been going on in my personal life that were really difficult. I had lost one of my closest friends to cancer. You know, I was dealing with some health stuff myself. We were and still are trying to move out of a home that has, you know, contributed to some of the health issues. And so the songs were about me really diving into these struggles and trying to find my way towards healing
Mm-hmm.
and into a better place, a place of being able to cope and move forward. So the songs themselves are inherently hopeful, but some of the subject matter was difficult. And so I think they were made for this time, in that, you know, people can enter into their own struggle through the music, but then they won't just be left there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they move towards hope. And so that's really what I envisioned for this album during COVID, was that it could be a source of encouragement for people, and people have said that it has been. And when we actually did a pre-release tour in February in Western Canada, and even before, you know, we were in this global pandemic, when I would share the stories live, people would come up to me after the show and they would be so candid about their own experiences. You know, thank you for sharing. There's a song called Wendy's Song, dedicated to my friend who passed
Mm-hmm.
away. And they would say, thank you for sharing that. And they'd share their own story. And it was so moving for me. And it just brought such relevance to the music. You know, you write these songs, you take a risk, it's so vulnerable, and you don't know if they're going to connect with people. And it was a real delight to see that they were connecting, and it brought so much more meaning to the work. And then, of course, once things changed in March, you know, I started hearing more and more feedback online about how the music was connecting with people. So that's been a silver lining, I guess.
What a wonderful gift it is for your audience, for your fans to have this music in this time period. I think, you know, we
Yeah.
all, search for things that make us feel more hopeful, make us feel better, that console us, that help us move through these difficult and challenging days. And
Yeah.
as much as it probably wasn't part of your plan to release the album in this way, and and not be able to tour it and so on in the same way, it does seem like such a gift for an audience to be able to experience those songs. And in listening to it, it really, it does feel very personal,
Yeah.
and sound very personal. Like I just, particularly with Wendy's song, that was, it
Yeah.
struck me immediately. Like, this is a very personal story, and it's your story, but others, others can put themselves into that place as well, and hear
Yeah.
their own stories maybe in that music.
Absolutely. The idea of regeneration. There's a line at the end of that song, and because I was actually with her in her final hours, which was just so profound. I'd never had that experience. And then in processing kind of the aftermath, it became so clear to me that, I know it sounds a bit cliche, but people really do live on in the way that we carry them forward and remember them and pay tribute to them and live our lives in a way that's different, in almost in honor of their memory. And
Mhm.
she was that kind of person. She was a mentor for me as well as a friend. And so, right around the same time that I wrote the song, there were those crazy wildfires in Australia.
Right.
And I just remember hearing this amazing story that had gone viral online. There was a gentleman living over there who, had gone to this area where the landscape had been totally charred. And he saw these like beautiful, bright green and pink colored shoots that were like popping up out of this like devastated earth. And I thought, that's such an incredible picture of, beauty for ashes, something new coming out of, what felt like devastation and loss. And so there's kind of a redemptive feeling to that song. And I know Wendy wouldn't have had it any other way.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's one of the messages of the album for sure.
Has this been a creative time for you, being in a position now, like, notwithstanding the fact that you've just telling me that you are now, homeschooling your son, and all of that, and we've dealt with that in our house as well, with kids adjusting to this new life, and everything else. But in some ways, being in this global pandemic where the entire world is going through something,
Mm.
very unique, but also kind of together, it could be inspirational, from a creative side, to sort of respond to that. On the
Yeah.
other hand, it's the chaos of day-to-day life and homeschooling, and trying to figure out what your day looks like, and how do you work creativity into all of that.
Yeah, it's been a very different kind of creativity. So I've been a little bit envious of the people but my peers, online, like writing songs in response to the crisis. And, I've seen entire albums get written and released in this time frame, not only in response to the pandemic, but in response to the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yes.
As a host at CBC Music, I'm seeing these new albums come in that have taken shape in these past 4 months in response. And I go, wow, how incredible to see that happen. I think for us, the creativity has been in, as we were discussing at the beginning of this interview, kind of reinventing how we share and disseminate music. I've been
Yeah.
doing a Quarantunes series.
Oh, yes.
And the second song, I don't know when this interview will air, but the second song will come out shortly, I think within the next couple of weeks. And that's going to be Revival. And this is where we've had, I think it's 17 people in their respective spaces record themselves with a click track.
Hmm.
So everybody is, singing and performing at the same time. And then we assemble those takes together, the music as well as the video. And of course, people are seeing lots of this online. I don't know if your choir has done anything like that yet.
We've done a little bit of that experimenting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So Quarantunes have been a bit of a creative outlet. And I think it'll be fun to see how in this time in history, you know, so many of these videos have popped up, and I'll be interested to see if people continue, you know, doing this sort of thing once the economies have fully opened and we're back on stage. But in terms of new music, you know, nothing has come up just yet. But what has happened is Ben and I, who don't typically, it's my husband Ben, the drummer, an engineer, we don't typically perform as a duo. That's something that we had to figure out how to do in no time at all.
Yep.
And then that got me thinking, because much of Out of Dust was recorded at home in our studio in the basement. And that got me thinking, you know, what could Ben and I create, just the two of us, for a new project? You know, what would that look like that didn't feel like a compromise, you know? But rather kind of an exciting new product of the times. And so that's been fun, finding our voice together as an organism. And, you know, it was really fun to bring George. We actually brought George into this living room for the first time for the Elora concert. So that was really special. But prior to that, it was just Ben and I, the two of us, kind of struggling our way through these songs that rely so heavily on a full band. So yeah, that's been interesting. And then Josh, our son, he has kind of been working his way into the family band. Yeah. And so that's been and he hadn't done that prior to pandemic. So, you know, what is his role? Well, so on the album, he plays a song, well, he doesn't actually play it on the record, but during pandemic, he played live with us for the first time this tongue drum part, which is this beautiful African instrument that he wrote this ostinato on for this song, Take the Day Off. So he would play that part with Ben and I. You can see we did a little performance that we recorded online. We're all in our pajamas because I think everybody was in their pajamas for the first few weeks of lockdown. And there's Josh on the tongue drum, or some people call it the log drum. And Ben is, you know, playing a little snare drum, and I'm just singing, and I've got the glockenspiel, and that's the Biali Whitman family band, the first iteration. But Josh plays piano and he sings, so I'd love to see him, you know, perhaps learning some keyboards. And, you know, he may end up touring with us as a result. I mean, I'm not kidding. Right. Why not? So, it'll be really interesting to see, what transpires. That's so great. That's so great. Who are your influences? Who do you listen to? Sometimes people are surprised by my answer to that question. I call myself a jazz musician. I consider myself a jazz musician, but, you know, I come from classical music. So I grew up listening to Angela Hewitt and Anton Rubinstein and Philippe Entremont and Andre Watts, and that was really my first love. And I would listen ad nauseum to those classical, those concert pianists. So I feel like there's some influence there, though my classical chops are not what they once were. It's been many moons since I took on ambitious classical repertoire. I was 13 really when I stopped playing classical piano. Right. But they can't be ignored. And then, you know, I discovered Joni Mitchell later in my life, and Sting, like these great singer-songwriters who have a very sophisticated harmonic approach that borrows from jazz. So, you know, they're definitely an influence. But then I also love really creative indie pop rock. I love Radiohead. I love Bjork. And then in the jazz space, you know, I think I gravitate towards artists who have a bit of a crossover sound. So Gregory Porter, Snarky Puppy, Jacob Collier, Esperanza Spalding. Yeah, you know, I do love some of the real classic artists, you know, Oscar Peterson, of course, and Keith Jarrett. Brad Meldau is a more modern jazz pianist, but he's been around a while. And for singers, you know, I'm probably the first singer that really got me excited about jazz, singer pianist, go figure, was Diana Krall. Of course. So there's a wonderful pianist, Jeff Keyser, who I love. Robert Glasper is somebody who was and is really exciting to me, again, because he used a hip hop producer on his record Canvas, and it created this like beautiful new sound, this hybrid of jazz and something other that to my ear as a young person was really exciting. You know, it felt like this new frontier for jazz. And I think jazz as a genre it kind of reinvents itself on an ongoing basis. And you know, it's such a generous genre. I know there's the jazz police who want to relegate it to this
Right,
narrow
it's
space.
yeah.
You know, but
Play
I
by the
do,
rules.
yeah, and I think jazz embraces such a breadth of
Mhm.
approaches, and I love that, and that's why I am comfortable calling myself a jazz musician to this day, even though there are the naysayers out there who go, "That's not jazz," you know.
I think we see we're seeing that sort of squeak its way into the classical world too, right? Because there are the
Interesting.
classical police, you know, and
Yeah,
things
sure.
should be done this way and that way, and you know more. Like I'm really interested. There's a group of composers in around New York right now whose music I just love, and it's a little bit of crossover. It's
Yeah,
very rooted in classical tradition and you know. Expression and form and so on, but you know there are pop influences and you know more urban kind of sounds, and it's like it's just really interesting to me, and I think you know I think as time goes we see these kind of genre walls being softened, at least if they're not being torn down, at least they're being softened a little bit, which is kind of interesting.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like as much as, you know, people kind of bemoan what streaming has done to the recording industry, um, I will say that what's great about artists being able to kind of bypass the gatekeepers, which I think is, you know, that's really one of the reasons that genre can become problematic, is you have people saying, well, you know, we're this kind of radio show, so if an artist doesn't quite fit that box, well, we can't play them.
Right.
So what do you do if you're an artist who's a little bit in the cracks, which that's me.
Right.
And so, you know, I've been able to find my audience by posting music on YouTube and Spotify, and people discover me themselves without having to go through radio. And thank God for CBC Music and Jazz FM and other outlets who, again, you know, take a wider view and aren't kind of set in their ways and are willing to kind of challenge their own concept of what a genre is to allow for artists like me in the mix.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Laila, thank you so much for spending this time with us this morning. And you know, our audience, I think, is really looking forward to your contribution to our little festival coming up in a couple of weeks. And yeah, it's just been really really wonderful to have this time spending with you and hearing a little bit about what life has been like for you for the last 4 months and what's coming up for you. So I appreciate the generosity of your time. And we look forward to your concert.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be able to do this, and thank you again for inviting us. It really does give us hope that there's a way forward, you know, through a presenter like you, who you're a musician yourself, and you're so passionate about how you can play a part in partnering with musicians like me. And it just means, yeah, more than words can express. So thank you, Mark.
It is our pleasure. And we will certainly look forward to that time when we can get our, you know, get the choir and you together and create something that breaks through genres, right? I mean,
I can't wait. Maybe we'll make a record.
There you go. That'd be so great.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Take
Laila.
care.
Take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
21st century. It was a year that shifted all of history. 6 billion souls, 3 planets from the sun. A new election. So who run, so who run?